What I want to do is, first of all, kick off. You can see our bios there. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on the introductions, but I do want to introduce my guest today, who is Andy Ryan. And Andy is somewhat of an expert in foreign language recruitment for call centres, sales, office, retail. And he's actually an ex-call centre leader, as I've said there, and he provides training for salespeople, both in the call centre environment, other sales environments, retail environments. So he's a consultant trainer. He's got a lot of experience in that field, as well as I say about being an expert in foreign language recruitment. So, hi, Andy.
Hi, good afternoon, Rob.
Right, okay, just the last bit of logistics before we get going, people. Can you all hear Andy loud and clear? Just tell me you can in the box. That would be great. Please, somebody. Can you hear Andy? Type in the box if you can. Yeah, great. Thank you. We're all good then. We're all good, ready to go. Okay, so I've got a lot to cover in the session today. We've only got half an hour. But what I do want you to do is feel that you can ask us questions as we go. So if you've got questions, please type in the box. I can't say that I'm going to answer them necessarily as we go through, because as I say, we've got some material to cover that I really want you to hear and share with you within the time frame. But if you could type those in, we're going to have some time for questions at the end. So I will pick up some of those questions as we go through. But let's get absolutely stuck in with Andy straight away. So if we talk about this whole issue of building the challenge here of building this robust foreign language candidate pipeline, can you give us just an overview of some of the problems, I guess, that are different, Andy, from when you're recruiting in the normal way if it's UK-based language speakers?
Okay, I think the first thing to cover, Rob, is there's a serious lack of local candidates. When you're looking for native speakers, there is a very limited pool of talent available to you, and certainly within the local vicinity there's a very limited amount of talent available to you.
Yeah.
The other thing is there's very much a strong competition for language speakers in any given area. It doesn't matter what part of the country you're in, or whether you're in a city or a large town or even a small village. There's always competition for those language speakers, so it becomes a very competitive market.
Yeah.
The additional challenge that a lot of companies have is when they're looking for specific skill sets. That then reduces that pool of talent down to almost nothing and is very challenging for them. The location is often a challenge as well. If you are a little bit more remote and it's not a town that attracts those native speakers, more often than not you're going to face challenges of not being able to find those local candidates for the positions that you have available.
So it's a kind of a typical thing. I hope most people can kind of resonate with that on the call today. The typical things, we just kind of recap here. So, as always, limited candidate pool was very competitive for those people, and, particularly if you want a certain type of skill, the foreign language obviously is just not enough, and where you're located is obviously an issue too. So given that, we're going to cover, as I promised in the webinar brief, that you've all signed up for. We really want to cover this today, and we're going to go through the solution. I'm going to ask Andy, as our expert in this field, to give us some of the things that he's done, but I don't want him to do it in sort of an abstract, theoretical manner. What I really want to do is use his real-life experience of working with companies on their foreign language recruitment challenges. And so we're going to make this very much case study based this afternoon, and I'm going to get Andy to sort of take us through some of the problems specifically that one or a number of his clients have had. So that's how we're going to play this. So now I think you've selected this company, Operatics, Andy, to tell us about, because they had specific challenges. Can you first of all just tell us a little bit give us a bit of background on the company, just set the scene for the people on the call today?
Okay, so Operatics are a professional business development company. They work within the IT sector, Rob. They work on behalf of some key IT players within the UK, and their primary goal is to generate business for their clients, opportunities for meetings, lead generation, etc. Now, they are based in the Hampshire area, and they certainly have had issues with finding that local talent, hence, this whole story behind them. One of the things I would say regarding operatics is they're calling into most of the European countries, so the available talent to them is incredibly important.
Okay, so just to summarise there, so it's sort of lead gen and appointment setting, so it's a sales focused environment really, yes?
It is. It is indeed.
So you've got the combination there, you need foreign language speakers because they're calling around Europe, and also they've got to be willing and prepared to or either have experience of sales or at least be interested in a career in sales.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so sort of a double, triple challenge. Okay, so that's what they do. That's what it's about. Tell us about some of the specific problems that they were having, because I think a lot of people on the call will relate to some of these problems if they're hiring foreign language speakers.
Okay, so the first thing I would say to you, when we first made contact with Operatics, understanding that they were looking for language speakers, the first comment we had from the client was that it's an impossible task. And I think sometimes it can seem like a really daunting task trying to find multiple language speakers in any given area. And certainly they had had 6 months of working on their own trying to find candidates originally, and then a further 6 months working with a couple of other agencies to try and identify and fill the vacancies that they had. When we first had a conversation with them, they had 17 language speaker vacancies, and bear in mind their team is a team of around 60. It's a significant number.
Wow, that is a lot of open vacancies there to fill. Okay, so there's a lot of we talk about these open vacancies. They tried different models and they thought it was an impossible task. So, I mean, what problems was that causing? I guess there's a lot of pain there.
Okay, so the biggest one at the time was obviously not being able to work with their clients in the manner that the clients have been accustomed to. Having, a head down on a campaign has a massive impact on the revenue generated. It has a massive impact on their pipeline, etc. Their market credibility was affected. They position themselves, and they are very much a very professional organisation. And when they're telling a client we can't start for 3 months because of the headcount, it certainly affected their credibility and certainly led to very difficult conversations with their clients and potential lost business. Another impact, and this is a real double-edged sword, is that they had attrition because of it. Their existing staff were overstretched massively, doing probably 2-3 campaigns more than they should have been working on, very stretched, possibly not creating the best results because they were so stretched. Morale was low, and as soon as they were finding candidates to come in, people were leaving because they had had enough of the workload.
Yeah, okay, so it's almost like running on that treadmill, standing still effectively, because the sooner, the more they got in, they're leaving at the same time. So sort of, yeah, difficult. Well,
in fact, going backwards, Rob, to be honest, going backwards at times.
Rather than going even standing still. Okay, well, I think a lot of people on the call will kind of understand that and some of the challenges there, and we talk about some of the implications that you've just mentioned there. So let's get straight on then. Given the problems, and no, it was a big issue for them. Let's talk about what you did and probably some new things that you learned on this particular assignment. I know you've been doing foreign language for years, Andy, but I know that each assignment you pick up something new, and I think this was no different.
Yeah, this one was different, Rob, because not everybody wants to work in sales. There really is a finite number of people who want to work within the sales environment. And then to get that background, to have the right candidates looking at the right kind of salary was hugely challenging. One of the things that we instantly recognized with both the approach of the previous recruitment agencies and themselves is their search was very limited. They had set their search to a 15 to 20 mile radius of their office. What that meant was a hugely reduced talent pool available to them. And the first suggestion that we made was to make that talent pool UK-wide. And we'll talk further, Rob, later on in the call about how we made that possible. But, looking further afield, was the first
Well,
suggestion.
hold on, that because that is kind of intuitive. Because everything that teaches us, when we're normally sourcing candidates, is that for that kind of role in particular, if they're not located, within 15, 20 miles, that's probably pushing it. That it's not going to work, and they don't hang around, and it creates its problems. So why is this any different?
Okay, so again, Rob, going on into sort of further into the slide set, we'll see how we've managed to attract those people. But what it meant initially, and this is, I guess, the sort of key point here, was a lot of hard work in terms of identifying candidates UK-wide. We trebled our resources here within the team and basically had a whole team of people calling people literally Scotland, Wales, Ireland, etc.
Okay. Sorry, Andy. I want you to bring this point out now. So what you're saying is you basically made the search, national, and you were calling people from, all over the country rather than just within the city.
Absolutely. Not just calling, Rob. We were emailing through the job boards. We were contacting them through social media, etc.
So why is it any different? Why is it any different, Andy, from when you're recruiting UK candidates if you came in?
The biggest thing for me, Rob, is that the native speakers, the language speakers, they're very much more transient than UK candidates. So they're going to be much more willing to move location for the right opportunity, for the right company, for the right salary, etc. And when we were approaching these candidates, the lovely thing for us was almost all candidates were interested, firstly, in the opportunity, but secondly, had no restrictions in terms of having, a base, ties to a particular area. They were very much in rented accommodation and available to move at very short notice.
Okay, so it's really basically that sort of, they haven't got the same roots, I guess, bedded down, given the fact they've come from foreign land, often from different countries anyway. So, okay,
That's right.
All right, absolutely makes sense. So that's a really good one. That's a really good point about broadening the search, which is probably counterintuitive to most of us, but that really worked for you in in this particular case.
Very much.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Let's look on to the second point then. So what's this about, Andy?
Okay, so rather than sort of limit ourselves again to UK searches, we decided that we would test a new approach even for ourselves, and that was to go into Europe and search the best job boards within each country, especially the countries where we had high numbers of staff to recruit. Germany, for instance, we had 6 vacancies. What we decided to do, Rob, we had all our job adverts written specifically for those countries, and we advertised and done proactive searches within those countries.
So
what that meant to us. Go on, sorry.
No,
Rob.
so we're actually looking then to get people to come across from their homelands effectively and come. Surely that's I mean, it's hard to imagine that too many people are going to want to do that, or am I wrong?
Yeah, it's interesting because the very first conversation I had with somebody in Germany, they said, I love this, and I know all my friends will love this because, we're fresh out of university, or within a year or two, we're looking for a career. We'd love to work in a different country. It looks fantastic on our CV. If we had 5 or 6 years working in the UK, that would set us up for life, etc. And we had almost no resistance whatsoever. Occasionally we come across candidates who had family commitments, but more often not, probably, as much as 7 out of 10 were available to come to the UK and were willing to come to the UK.
That is so interesting. So to go looking further afield, I guess that's I guess I'm slightly worried about I know that operatics know them well in terms of they need to move quickly. I mean, but doesn't it take months for people to move?
Well, again, really with a lot of the candidates that we were looking for, they didn't have those roots. They weren't, in their own home. They were renting, or they were still at home with their parents, or sharing accommodation with friends. And we really only had one instance where somebody had a long lead time. However, even with that person, Rob, because we're always growing this account, that person still is in the model for 3 months' time when they're going to be available to move to the UK. So that's part of our pipeline for the future as well.
Yeah, okay, I get that. I think, so probably for the, people, the younger candidates, less ties. I think so obviously it's going to be more difficult for more experienced people who've got families and all those kind of things. But for sort of the more younger candidates, this kind of works well.
It is more difficult, Rob, but I want to stress again there, it's not impossible. Even people with families and family ties, there is nothing that prevents them if, they're looking for a change, looking for something new and challenging. There is still that opportunity for them. And again, we have attracted whole families to come across to the UK.
Okay, that's really interesting. So it's a really good point. Looking in country to bring people over. I think this next point, I suppose, just point on that. Obviously, particularly much easier within the EU where there's freedom of labour, etc. I guess so.
Very much so. Yeah, where no work permits are required, etc. The process is much simpler and much quicker.
Fine. Okay. Look, I know this is a related point, but a real key one, and made a lot of difference with operatics in particular. Talk us through this, Andy.
Okay, so this is where I sat down with a client and we went through, how are they going to differentiate themselves to the competition? All of the competition were offering similar packages, and what's going to set them apart, what's going to attract the candidates, what's going to bring candidates from other parts of the UK or travelling in from Europe to live in the UK. And the first thing that we suggested was that they provide rental accommodation to those candidates for the first 3 months that they were here. Now, I'm going to be honest, they did not do this rent-free for their candidates. They'd done a reduced rent. So the candidates had available money when they first arrived in the UK. It was very much reduced rent, but there was a rent still payable. And for a 12-week period, that person has lived in the accommodation provided by my clients, and it's meant that they could move instantly from wherever they are in the country, providing they don't have to give any notice off their rentals, their existing rentals. They've been able to move immediately and start immediately with the client.
Well, that's sorry, Andy. I'm going to go across you. I suppose anything that in the back of my mind there, and I'm sure people on the call, is the cost implications of that.
Okay, so the cost implication, Rob, to them, it costs them about £1,000 a month at the moment. However, the fact is the increase in volume of campaigns that they've taken on, the fact that all their campaigns are fully staffed now, the fact that their clients are coming to them for more campaigns, that runs into tens of thousands, Rob. And this £1,000 is a drop in the ocean and has been a huge success for them.
Well, I get that. I suppose the other thing, and it wasn't the only thing you did to make things kind of easier, was it? What else? Tell us a bit more about that.
I think there's lots of things to make the person feel comfortable when they arrive. So not only providing the accommodation, we put together a really detailed pack around everything to do with the UK, information around, business within the UK, information around, the rail network, the bus networks, the social scene in the UK. We try to put them in contact with people who are already working with operatics, so sharing houses with similar language speakers. Also, we provided a mentor for them, so somebody same language working within operatics become their mentor, there to answer questions, go to lunch with them, etc., etc. And it really works.
Yeah.
It proved to be very, very successful for them.
Yeah, I think that's just that little bit of extra.
One of the other things, actually, Rob, whilst you're on that subject, we also created a list of all the websites where there was rental properties available, and that meant that they could get a head start, even if they had that surety of the 12 weeks of living in the rented accommodation belonging to the client. It also meant that they could start their property search much sooner.
Yeah, I get you. Okay, well that's a really good one. So it's really just about making this thing smooth and easy, that extra effort to make it comfortable. Let's move on, because I knew that we were pressed for time, and we've got a few things that we need to get through. Tell us about this. So this is looking more locally, isn't it? So what's the local language company map?
Okay, so for me, again, we looked at a 20-mile radius of our client and thought, okay, so within this area, there's 9 or 10 very similar companies doing a very similar role to what's the opportunity for operatics. What we done there was we proactively headhunted some of those staff to an operatics opportunity, very much using social media, which we'll go on to a little bit later. But we identified similar companies and then identified the staff and then made those headhunter type calls into those people to resource them for operatics.
Well, and I think the other thing in here is that I do know that, and I know some of your team here, it's really, I mean, it's always, candidate intelligence is always really important, but I think in terms of understanding a local picture of where foreign language speakers are working, that kind of candidate intelligence is sort of worth double, triple, isn't it, to sort of build up that picture so you know where all the language speakers are in the local area, should you need to go proactive and need to sort of move fairly quickly.
Very much so. And one of the things, we get clients regularly, Rob, say to us, we're not sure about that headhunting thing, how ethical is that, etc., etc. The one guarantee I can give everybody is if you're not doing it, your competition are, and it's a really important way of recruiting and resourcing for any vacancies at the moment.
Well, with my background, you won't obviously find any argument from me, as you know, but but I think, okay, good point, but it's really about building up that local picture of where the foreign language speakers are so that we can go and shop there. Let's move on to the next point then. Look, I mean, it's quite an interesting one, this referrals, because, I mean, referrals has also always been important in recruitment, and if we recruitment professionals, if we've got people on the call in recruitment, who else do you know has been a common question for us. But, so why is this any different? Why we specifically think this is good for foreign language?
Okay, referrals in the UK, no doubt, 100% it works. It doesn't work fantastically, but it does work. What we found with language speakers, native language speakers, they have a community. When they come to the UK, more often than not, they know people who are already here, already working, and they go into shared houses where there may be 5 or 6 other language speakers within that house. They also have a community where they all meet up for certain events, etc., etc. And we've found it to be probably quadruple the success of when we do this with a UK candidate. You get referrals. We offer it's only a small amount as a bounty, if you like. We offer a small amount to these candidates for doing referrals for us, and we've had huge success with it. Not just with operatics, but across all of our clients and all of the campaigns that we've worked on.
Yeah, so I think it's just it's from what you were saying. Then I think the foreign language piece is that. Basically it's worth about 3 or 4 times the referral in the UK, because people, they genuinely do seem to want their friends maybe to come along and etc. And they're working and living with these people, so it makes a big difference.
And one thing just to throw in here, just in case there's any doubt, we had 4 people from one house who were successful, and a friend who lived outside that house, so 5 from one person joining the company, and I think that's a really powerful statement.
It's also a record, I think. But there you go.
Yeah, very much so. Very much.
Okay, well, that's good. Okay, so really important from that point of view. I'm just conscious of time, and I don't want to rush this, but I do want to be respectful of the people's time, so I'm gonna move through. Look, the whole thing around social media and the proactive approach to candidates. Andy touched on it a little bit beforehand, but I think, obviously it is important these days. I'm sure a lot of you are using LinkedIn to identify candidates. You may even be advertising on LinkedIn, etc. And it is one of the key medias, I guess, mediums for finding those kind of candidates. But what I have found, Andy, and I think this is the same when I spoke to you about what we might be able to do about building foreign language candidate pipelines, is that it's very underused. People don't really understand fully how to use it and how to get the most out of it. And I think if you do actually spend some time to really understand the full power, then, well, I've sourced whole campaigns with just LinkedIn, using no other methods and methodology. And you found it very useful in this particular situation, I know, didn't you, Andy?
Yeah, very much so. And again, it is actually very rare with a lot of the clients that I speak to that they do use it for resourcing campaigns. It's a really powerful tool. There is no doubt whatsoever without things, and it's not just LinkedIn, but without LinkedIn in particular, we wouldn't have had quite the success that we had as instantly as we had it with the, particularly with the operatics contract, and probably with one or two other very difficult contracts for us where, you know, the specialism is so unique. To go to LinkedIn and find that right candidate makes it a lot more possible for both us and for our clients.
Particularly if you have to utilise it properly, I think that's the key. I think, but I say that's probably a subject for a whole webinar on its own, and maybe we'll do if there's enough demand. We'll talk about that in a completely different session, because we certainly spend half an hour on sourcing through LinkedIn and how to make the most of it. So I don't think we can dwell on that now, but what we can do is, because we've got a few minutes left, and I think we've covered some key points. That there's no way we can cover everything that we did here, but thanks for sharing that, Andy. What I want to do is take some questions in just a moment. So I've got a few questions in the box, but just before I do that, let's just recap them with the operatics. You know, what were the key outcomes then for us in that particular case study, Andy?
Okay, so probably the greatest outcome is for operatics, all their foreign language vacancies are now filled. But probably more importantly, we've got a pipeline. We've got several candidates keen to come and work in the UK. They've been interviewed. They're ready to, you know, literally make that transition. However, you know, until that next campaign comes on board, you know, that person is kind of on ice. But what it means is there's never going to be a point where they're going to suffer with, you know, any times where there's attrition or, you know, a brand new campaign that has urgency with it. We've got the staff ready to go on that. Morale lifted. The attrition has actually gone to almost, well, it's not quite zero, but it's down very, very low now. And I think that's a key reason or a key result of the increased staff there. Certainly with the clients much happier, KPIs and SLAs certainly being achieved. And the client retention and attraction is definitely gone up. You know, certainly on the attraction side, more and more clients are coming on board, you know, and they've got the confidence now to sell their product without worrying about whether they're going to resource it or not in the given time frame.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I mean, we'll just summarise that, but I think this is a key point. Again, I don't want to rush you, Andy, but we are conscious of time. But there's a warning here with a lot of heavy lifting. What message are you trying to give us?
Okay, so I would say, you know, let's not kid ourselves. There's a huge investment of time. It's not easy to start this process and run the process. Once it's in place, it becomes a little bit easier. However, you know, to set this process up, get it running and get it working as efficiently as we all need it to, it's a huge effort. Like I said, we had to massively increase our staff here just to be able to manage this, and you know, we've done it over a short period of time, but you know, just don't underestimate how much work is involved.
Okay, well, it's a good tip for us. Look, I'm really keen now to take a few questions because we've got a few coming in. First of all, someone's asked if there's going to be a recording of today's webinar. I think that was Patrick, or Patricia, I should say. Yes is the answer. We can get you a recording of that. So would there be a similar take-up? I'm just going to go through some of the questions here. Would there be a similar take-up in other countries such as Germany? Such as German speakers in Hungary. So would there be similar take-up other countries such as German speakers in Hungary? I don't know if you've got specific experience of that, but I can't think of any reason why the same strategies wouldn't work. Would you, Andy?
Yeah, I don't have any experience of that, Rob, if I'm honest. I think the strategy would work. I don't know whether it would have quite the outcome that we've had with the UK. The UK is very attractive for people to come to. I don't know is the honest answer, but I think the theory and the practice is exactly the same, and I can't see any reason why it wouldn't work.
Okay. I've got a question from Chris here. If you had an office in Sweden, is there any value in setting up an exchange program? That sounds like a really interesting idea.
That definitely sounds like a fantastic idea, and certainly in terms of something like that, again, it's not something I've considered, so I've got no great in-depth knowledge to share here, but I think that's a fantastic idea.
Good. Okay. All right. I think that's good. And I know you said the only sources to find Swedish language skills in the UK. I think, Chris, there are some of the strategies that we've talked about will work. Will work very well for Swedish candidates. I mean, clearly there are some other kind of restrictions potentially, but I think if you implement what Andy's talked about today, I think it would work very well for Sweden. I've got a question here. Are you looking at trilingual stuff, i.e. 10% of the workforce to maximise productivity? So is a person talking French, German plus English?
It's really interesting you should say that, because we have well, in fact, we've got two clients, but one in particular who has literally a weekly requirement for this type of language speaker. They often have a requirement for German and Italian, French and Italian, Spanish and German. They're not the easiest combinations either. You can quite often associate French and German or Dutch and German. When you're coming into Italian or Spanish and German, it does become more difficult. But again, this actually works really well for that, and we have introduced this with those clients and actually been a lot more successful with that. So 100% this process does work for that.
Yeah, I suppose going in country, I mean, it's which in country you go, and then they need another language on top. But I suppose it still works. It's just going to be maybe, it's a bit.
Yeah, it's more challenging. Again, I'm not going to hide the fact it is more challenging to find them. There's certainly a much smaller pool of candidates, but it's certainly, for me, it's a lot easier than finding local candidates. You could do a 50-mile radius search and not find a single candidate with German and Spanish. Whereas, if you go wider, you absolutely have that pool of candidates available to you.
Okay, that's good. There's a question here from Suzanne, which I think we might have to take offline. My client ramps up and down for language recruitment, only offering 3-month contracts at any time during summer and Christmas. Any suggestions? I can think of a couple that maybe, Suzanne, if that's good with you, because we've got quite things to get through. That's quite a specific one. We'll come to you offline on that, because I know we had a client that was similar to that, Andy, didn't? Or you had a client that was similar to that you worked on.
We have indeed. I'd be more than happy to take that offline and have another conversation regarding that topic.
Okay. All right, Suzanne, bear with us. We'll get back to you on that one. Our companies, just one more, I think, and then we're going to have to. We'll take. Look, if you have asked questions we haven't answered, don't worry. We'll come back to you. But our company's starting to look at the specifics. Get my teeth in of dialects within country languages. Andy, over to you. That now.
I have not had any experience of that. Is the one thing I would say. There is an element of that, and certainly, from different regions, and I have got one client who wants candidates from a specific region. However, it's not that common at the moment.
I've definitely had one, Andy, just to add on that then. When I was recruiting in Belgium, they speak different, I think they speak, that's...
Yes,
Belgium, I mean, that was different languages even, wasn't it? So it's French and...
Yeah, it does happen. It's not as common.
No, but I remember with that. But I think the strategies still work, don't they? Because if you're looking to recruit in from a certain area within that country where they speak a certain dialect, that could still work for you. And then
that's exactly it. You identify the area that those speakers come from, and that's where your campaign gets focused.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we haven't covered that one off sufficiently, we will do. Sharon, so to leave us with that. Look, people are having to go now. I can see that a couple of people having to log off, and we have gone over time. So I really, let me wrap up now, and we'll come back to any questions. Obviously, we've only been able to cover a certain amount in half an hour, and you'll all have your specifics. It's quite obvious from your questions where you need to drill down in specific areas. And sometimes, we'll hold our hands up. We may not have had that specific experience, but we are very experienced at coming up with different solutions for different scenarios and your specific ones. So if you'd like us to drill down in more detail and look at your specific problems, we'd be delighted to see if we can help and bring our sort of experience to bear on that. So if you'd like a bit more drill down and your specific requirements, etc., and completely no obligation, obviously, just drop me an email to that address, and we will find a way to book a time in where we can spend a bit more time looking at your specifics. If we've come across it before, fantastic. We will let you know, and we will share that experience. And if we haven't, but we've got some ideas around it, often we've worked on something similar, so we can bring that experience to bear. But apart from that, I just hope that everyone on today's call has found that useful, and sharing some of those tips. I know that you learnt some new things, Andy, as well when you on this particular assignment. But
Yeah, huge.
I just want to thank you for your time today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And as I say, please drop me a line if you'd like to know more about foreign language recruitment, native foreign language in particular, which is tough still. Do drop me a line. I'd be delighted to speak to you. Apart from that, it just leaves me to say thank you so much for so many of you taking time out of your day to join us today. Very much appreciated, and I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rob.